Welcome back to Punches and Bunches, the official podcast of the South Texas Amateur Boxing Association. My guest on the program is the leader of the South Texas Amateur Boxing Association, President Eddie Garcia. Eddie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, no problem, buddy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's start with this. The basic question, year in review. Let's review the year. Tell us a little bit about what STABA had going on in 2025. What did we get right? What were the cool things we did? And what were the lessons? What were some of the lessons we learned?
Hmm. Okay. Well, we had a good year. We'll
Mhm.
start with that. We have close to 3,000 members, so that's a good thing. We started the year with the Golden Glove season. We had a good showing at the regionals and states, and um, did good there. Our JOs, it's always a big deal. Again, we had more than 400 boxers sign up. We had it there in Edinburgh. Another record attendance there for the city of Edinburgh. Working with the city of Edinburgh, the departments, Parks and Rec, with Eric Molina. Um, we brought in the Swiss timing, so that was a first. We actually put it to use. I do feel bad. Lessons learned. One ring of the three couldn't. We had to work out some bugs, and we couldn't really get it working. But we sat back, we did an after action review, and hopefully got a plan for next year, Edinburgh, to get that worked out. But two of the three rings did work, with the Swiss timing and the scoring. So the coaches did that, and for our officials, that was a first for them, actually using the score pad and having the scores come up for the coaches. So that was a good thing. JOs was another good turnout at nationals. We had a lot of national JO champions. International wise, Jennifer Lozano competed internationally. Noelle Harrow she had her first international competition, I guess we could say, there in Canada, but for unforeseen circumstances, she wasn't able to compete. But she had her first international experience. She's been in camp previously. For her to go to Canada with the team and I guess get on that stage was good for her. We had Anthony Lona out of Montopolis. He, I believe, went to Germany, I believe, to compete internationally on the youth team. So that's another positive. And then ending the year, we had the LBC championships, and we've always had it's always been a smaller tournament for the LBC, being that it's only youth and elite. We had 180 boxers sign up, 184, and we actually brought out two full rings, 3 days full of boxing. So that was another good thing. And then to finish off national championships there in Lubbock in December, here, 2 weeks ago, we had 11 national champions, from bantam to elites. Um, so yeah, it's just a good year overall for South Texas.
Good year for STABA. We're looking ahead into 2026. Of course, I think we have one more event, 2025 in Killeen, the day after Christmas. So we don't want to forget about that. We do have one more event, but generally looking ahead to 2026, you mentioned the JOs. We'll be back in Edinburgh for the JOs. Always a good time in Edinburgh. At the Nationals, I know there were talk of getting Zimpower to some of the local LBCs. Possibly, we'll be somewhere on that list sometime down the line. Tell us, Golden Glove season coming up, the works, the regular things. So tell us about some of what you're looking forward to and what you have your eye on in 2026.
Yeah, no, we like you said, we're starting off with the Golden Glove season. That's end of January there in Austin. We're ending in Edinburgh, beginning of March. Yeah, I'm sorry, the RGV Golden Gloves are going to be in Port Isabel. Um, so we have that coming up, and you touched on it, Zempower. Zempower is the new scoring system. Um, I've already contacted USA Boxing, Mike Campbell and Tanner there in Colorado about booking us those dates. So hopefully it's available. We can bring it down. I've already spoken to the Zempower admin, Jonathan. and Diana and Sean. They're in Houston out of the Gulf, and they're down. They're going to come help us set up if it's available. Uh, so that's a good thing. It's going to be in Edinburgh, March 1st through the 3rd, 2nd through the 4th. That weekend, they're in Edinburgh again. The LBC Championships, we have them set up for here in San Antonio, second, third week of October, I believe. So I'm currently looking for a venue for that. Um, but yeah, no. Next year is another exciting year.
Let me jump in here. What are
Yeah,
for those who don't know what Zim Power is, who aren't in the administration of amateur boxing that might be getting lost in this, what is Zim Power? Basically, it's something that we're using kind of to cut down on making bout sheets and administrating amateur bouts. Is that correct?
yeah. It's basically the scoring system, but it's a scoring system, but the results are instantaneous. You
Hmm.
know, there's no longer getting the results, printing them out, and then running them to the score to the announcer, because now there's a connection from the announcer to the scoring system.
Hmm.
So the results are instant. And a positive for the boxers and coaches is the results automatically get entered into WebPoint. So there's another positive.
Hmm.
And the coaches are familiar. Some of the officials are as well. It just upgraded the scoring system as well. There at the screens, for the red and blue corner. And one thing they were trialing there in Lubbock was the time. They had a separate box that kept time, so it was able to show the coaches the time running.
And one
So
thing,
so if we're able to, hopefully we can get that down and have it set up. So keeping our fingers crossed.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's jump out of the weeds of Zim Power and let's talk about some actual boxing here.
There we go.
One thing about you as president is, I know you're very involved in, the success of our boxers, making sure they have every opportunity they get to live out their potential. Who are some standouts for you coming out of STABA this year? I know you mentioned Jennifer Lozano. That's our STABA Olympian. Of course, we lost Emilio, who was one of our better boxers. He went pro. Who are some of our big standout names that if somebody doesn't know boxing, but they should keep an eye on three or four names that are going to be rising up the ranks? I know you've touched on a few of them. Who are those standouts you're looking at?
Yeah. Like you said, touch on them earlier. Really, on the national level, you got Lona Montopoulos, Noel out of Relentless. Christian Baez. He was he defeated one of the Patricio brothers from Hawaii there at the national championships, um,
Which isn't easy.
which is not easy at all. Yeah, not easy. And previously, he's lost to Patricio. I forget his name. Um,
There's a few of them.
yeah. Yeah, I forgot his name, but he's lost to him previously. If I remember correctly, I think it was in Vegas. He might have lost to him.
Hmm.
Christian Pius. But to see him finally take that step, and in the national championships in his first year as a youth, was big. Um, and of course, in the younger divisions, bantam, coming into intermediate, you know, of course, we have Jax Penny, Caleb Avila, Joel Garcia. On the female side, you got Retis, Millie there in the valley. You know, and this is all just off the top of my head. Um, but in regards to the nationals, seeing Lorna Noel and Christian Baez, see where they go, is going to be exciting. And well, Merrick too. I'm doing her injustice. Merrick out of Uvalde, in the elite division, you know, 176 plus. She came out in first place as well. So I see them getting some national camp invites.
Absolutely.
And then World Boxing has their uh, tournament selection process, or however USA Boxing and World Boxing uh, get their rosters. So it's exciting to see what's going to happen.
We've got a lot of good boxers coming out of South Texas, especially in some of the lower weight classes. It felt like, at those national tournaments, we kind of dominate in some of the lower weight classes. How important is it, maybe both for boxers and for officials, to be going to those national tournaments, testing themselves at that level, facing people different styles, different, heights, sizes? Just how important is it both for our boxers and our officials to be, competing and testing themselves at the national level?
You left out coaches.
And
It's
coaches.
also very important. It's also very important for the coaches as well. Um, it's a good thing, to test yourself, test your boxer, test the knowledge as an official. You know, um, as an official, Robert Gonzalez from Corpus, he went his first nationals. He says, "Hey, I've been studying. I want to try my level three." He took it and passed.
Mhm.
So being a level three official means you're an expert in the rules. You know what's going on. Um, so for him to take that step, dared himself to be great, and he came out. Ended up passing his level three exam. So that's great. Um, but yeah, getting the coaches, getting the boxers to go to nationals, like you said, and really just testing your limits. Spoke to a lot of first time coaches. That have been there as boxers, and now they're there as coaches, and man, it's changed, or it's faster. Now we know what we got to do when we're in the gym, and coaches are calling, hey, well, when's the next one? Can't wait for the next one, or something like that. But it's very important, to be 20-0 at club shows, is completely different than going against a number one ranked kid from Ohio,
Mhm.
or California. It's completely different. So seeing that, getting that exposure is incredible. I recommend it for everybody.
And it's more intense, that's like in some of those fights, it's almost like a Super Bowl atmosphere. You see people lose a close bout. Maybe you see some tears, you see, five judges, which you don't often see at the local level. So things come down to like a 3-2 split decision. That there's a level of intensity there at the national tournaments, for the boxers for sure, right?
Yes, you can. I can see where it can be overwhelming, because even in official, it's overwhelming. It can be. You can get lost in the moment real quick.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's now you're in front of a crowd. A pretty good crowd. We had good crowds there in Lubbock all week. And the crowds in Vegas were incredible. Just these tournaments, and then, like I said, you're you're standing in your corner, and across from you, I can imagine, you see a boxer that you follow on Instagram or whatever, and you're like, man, that's the number one ranked guy. Holy smokes, this is really going to happen. It's got to be intense. You know,
There was some incredible fighters there. I don't like to, you know, throw out names and whatnot because you never know where these guys are going to go, and especially the ones that aren't from our LBC. I don't want to be accused of being a fanboy or anything, but there's some incredible fighters. There was a guy from DC, I will say that I think everybody was interested in watching, and I just would recommend to any boxers, coaches, and of course officials because you don't want to put officials in the same bracket as boxers, but it is important to test yourself among the best officials there, and there's plenty of good ones, and there's a lot of people you can learn from at those events.
exactly, exactly, and it's just opening your mind to that. Getting some sparring rounds or sitting down and just talking to these people. Everyone's there to help each other grow. You know what I'm saying? And it's not coming from a bad place. It's hey, I want to learn. I want to absorb. When am I going to be in a room with this knowledge? Again. So just take advantage of it completely.
Absolutely. And we mentioned Golden Glove season is coming up, and typically before Golden Glove season, that also means seminar season where we have our trainings. I know we've got a few trainings coming up in South Texas. What are those for? Which ones are coming up? How important is that for officials to be, going in and sharpening their tools every so often? How important are those little seminars?
Yeah, no, it's very important. First off, it 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 increases the head count for officials. Um, our first one is going to be, I'm targeting mid-January. I already spoke with the coach. He's opened up his venue, his gym there in the valley. So I'm targeting there. I just need to look at the calendar. I need to get with Sabrina, look at the calendar, and get a date. So the coach was like, "Yeah, just let me know what date, and it's y'all's." So, um, but yeah, it's a learning lesson. And when we put clinics on the calendar, I put, all are welcome. Coaches, parents, and boxers are more than welcome to attend. Again, it's just free knowledge that's out there, to make the coaches better, to make the boxers better. Um, we did a clinic in Austin probably about a month or two back, and maybe 3 months ago. Anyways, and there was there was maybe 10 boxers, 10 coaches, and like two or three officials. you know. So that was great. I was like, this is awesome, thanks. And the boxers were engaged, and we judge a bout, and I gave them all scorecards, and it got an intense conversation of judging bouts, and I tell them, like, look, this isn't easy, because even between the coaches, they're like, I had this, and how did you have that? And you see what I'm saying? So it's good to see that, you know,
Mhm.
and having the boxers present was again great because now they're seeing about through our eyes. And like I say, we're not seeing the bout with our hearts, we're seeing it with our eyes. Um, like I said, January, we're going to be in the Valley
Mhm.
for a clinic. In February, we're going to have another officials clinic in San Antonio here at Ferocious Gym, beginning of February. First weekend, I have to look at the sheet, but it's first weekend of February. Um, and then we have a coaches clinic
Mhm.
in March at the Austin Women's Boxing Gym. March 22nd through the 24th, 23rd, 24th, something like that. We'll get all that info once it's posted online through USA Boxing. Um, but no, it's really important. Like I said, it's just free knowledge out there. Why not go and get it?
And I will definitely link to the calendar in the show notes for even, people that just happen to be listening that might want to participate, might want to get involved with amateur boxing. Um, you mentioned the
Yeah, and
boxers.
you know what? And you know what? For anyone, not just in South Texas, but if anyone watching this is interested in becoming an official, from wherever, give us a call, and we'll be able to link them to a clinician in whatever area that they're in.
And it's a fun thing to do. I mean, even if you're a weekend warrior, watch a little boxing every week and nothing wrong with that.
Phew, sitting ringside, what more do you want?
Absolutely. You mentioned boxers coming to these things, and I think it's so important because I don't think people maybe realize that amateur boxing, Olympic style boxing, it's scored a little different than in the pros. And the big emphasis obviously is the clean quality blows on the target area. We're from South Texas, we tend to like the Mexican style action, action, action. But sometimes you go to these national tournaments and you see the so-called boxer, versus the brawler, and the boxer maybe throws four or five punches and lands three of them, and our guy, our aggressive guy, throws a lot, doesn't land many, and feels like he's robbed maybe, or feels like she's robbed. But it's a little bit different, and there's a little bit of maybe a learning curve for boxers and coaches from South Texas. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and again, that goes back to knowing the rule book,
Hmm.
going to a clinic. I've seen it, I've heard it. Man, Eddie, I think we won that bout. We threw more punches, or
Hmm.
my guy pushed forward the whole time. And I'm like, man, that's not the scoring criteria. You know,
Nothing
the
about pushing
scoring
forward in the
criteria
rules.
is not in the rules. Yeah, and unfortunately, so yeah, it's like I said, it's just knowledge that's there. You know, come out. Let's talk boxing for 4 hours on a Saturday or Sunday morning. And take the exam if you like. I tell the coaches and anyone over 18 that comes out to a clinic, you know, uh, go ahead, test yourself, sit through the clinic, test yourself, do the exam. Doesn't mean you're going to become an official. You don't have to become an official. You just take the exam. You'll get your level one certification. Doesn't mean you have to go to events, or some people might be intimidated. Well, I don't want to become an official because I don't want to ref. Like no, 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 no. It doesn't mean you're going to ref. Come out, do the exam. You could judge, you could timekeep. If you just want to clerk, just want to work the glove table. I mean, all that is fine. Just come out, take the test. Let's talk.
And it's not to be biased or anything. Sometimes the brawlers will win these fights if they land more clean punches, but it's just helpful for everybody to have an understanding of the rules we're looking at. And when boxers and coaches come to these things, it doesn't hurt. You mentioned officials in that answer though. Let's I'm having so much fun having this conversation that I want to extend it a little bit.
Yeah.
An official comes, they want to become a level one, they want to get their certification. Tell a little bit about your journey because obviously you're the president of the LBC now. You're a mainstay kind of at the national tournaments. You're well known in boxing circles. Tell us about your day one as a level one official. How did you get in the game?
I tell everybody um I remember back when newspapers were a thing. Back in my day when newspapers were a thing, I read an article. It was during the Mayweather Pacquiao fight coming up. I went and bought a newspaper. You remember those newspaper salespeople? Man, you might be too young for that too. The newspaper salespeople there at the corners. You know what I'm talking about? Like
I
at
remember
410 or
when the
1604 or something.
Spurs would win the championship, they'd be out there with the
Yeah,
newspaper.
there you
Yep,
go. They
yep.
had, okay. Okay. So I went ahead, I gave them my $2 and I bought a newspaper or whatever. Came home and I'm reading an article on and I'm pretty sure it was Whistler from here in San Antonio, the writer.
Mhm.
Um, I'm curious if we could find that clip.
I'm sure we could. Well,
Anyways, there's an article, and at the very bottom it says, if you're interested in becoming an official, a boxing official, call this phone number. I was like,
mhm,
man, how serious can this be? Like, really? And just a little further back, we're from Corpus Christi. So before we moved to San Antonio, I was training to become a football referee.
mhm.
So I saw that and I took it as hey, let's get into this. I was like, how serious can this be? Right. So I call a number and turns out it was my mentor on the other end of the line, Mark Kaloy, you know, and we just sat there and talked, hey, come out to the clinic. This is what we could do, whatever, whatever. So, okay. So I go do my clinic. There was a one-on-one with him, you know, we did the clinic there at the old San Fernando downtown, became an official, and worked the glove table, timekeeping. I didn't start judging till maybe 4 or 5 months in,
Mhm.
and just I loved what I did. I knew I was going to love it. I tell everybody, get on the road, see different styles because I did it. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? My first event was at the Traders Village here in San Antonio. My second event was in Eagle Pass, and my third event was in Corpus because from Corpus. I went to Corpus to go visit my family.
Mhm.
So, when I tell officials, get on the road, man, go out, go see other areas, go check it out, you know. So I did that. Um, Worked my way up, became a level two. 2 years later, became a level two. And then right at my 4.5, 5 year mark, I did my first national tournament in uh, Madison, Wisconsin.
Mhm.
Madison, Wisconsin. It was in June 2019.
Beautiful that
Awesome.
time of year.
Oh my God. Beautiful. Beautiful. My second one was 2019, the last chance qualifiers at the National Pals there in Oxnard. They're in Oxnard, California. Incredible. Incredible. Loved it. And just since then, just been grinding, dude.
Mhm.
Just stayed on the grind. Got my level three there in Wisconsin. Got my clinician certification, and just been working at it, dude. Just been working. Kept my head down, doing whatever. People people just see the event and then they leave. What they don't see is the after or the before. No one sees the ring set up. No one sees me, dumping spit buckets.
Hmm.
Man, I love that stuff. It's the spit bucket, the tape, the water bottles that get left behind. I'm throwing them, cleaning the ringside. I love it. Not too proud.
Uh-huh. I don't see the ring setup either. I'm never there for that. So
Yeah,
I'm with these people that have never seen it because
yeah,
I don't think my lazy ass has ever seen it. But anyhow,
yeah,
let me
yeah.
ask you this, reffing in particular, because I know that's something where some people get in, they just want to judge because they're nervous to get in the ring. Tell us what that's like. Yeah, I mean, you've been reffing for many years now. I believe you've even been in a music video where you played a referee.
Oh, really,
No,
dude?
just to
Really?
mention, you've got some experience. You've been around.
Uh,
You're a great referee. Tell us about your first time getting in the ring. Were you nervous, and how have you grown as a referee since that first time?
man, dude, I remember. I think the first time I ref, I don't think Mark was there. I think Marianne was the supervisor, and and I remember her saying, slow down, sit up,
Mm.
because of course they put me in with the peewees, so of course I'm
Oh
hunched
yeah.
over.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? Because they're so small. I felt like I was hunched over. Um, but yeah, I remember her telling me like slow down, and I remember, again, this was 2015, maybe end of 2015, going into 2016. I was able to rely on Cynthia Trejo and Anthony de los Santos. I
Mhm.
was able to rely on them. They had more experience than me. So sitting down, talking to them, hey, how did I look? How did I do this? And Cynthia or Anthony were like, hey, try doing this, whatever, whatever. And just like I said, just not having a big head about myself, but just taking it. Oh, okay, yeah. So maybe did I do it like this? Yeah, you did it like that. Try doing this instead, and applying it. And that's like, again, going back to nationals. That's where that's where you sit down and talk to other national referees. Brent Bovell is one of the best in the country, one of the best in the world. I'm there talking to him.
Mhm.
Um, we were talking about the LBC championships. We were able to bring down Latasha Washington from DC, from the Potomac Valley,
Mhm.
LBC. And she came down, and I told our referees, I told them, I said, I'm always telling y'all certain things, critiquing y'all. I said, but I'm bringing a different voice in, And sure enough, she was giving our officials the same feedback, and they were like, "Man, you were right," And I didn't realize I did it like this, and I was like, "Really, dude? I've been telling you, But that's the cool thing about going to nationals, working with Brent Bovell and Jamil Ali and Jamal Brown and Latasha, and working with world officials, Kathy Rivera, and getting some of that work and bringing it down and learning from them and bringing it back home. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. And what's it like on the, administrative or OIC or president side, when you have a bad referee like me that just doesn't quite get it? How do you give them the bad news that, hey, buddy, hey, Matthew, you got to go?
No, stop. Come on. You're being too hard on yourself. It's just a constructive criticism.
Mhm.
I don't even know if criticism is the word. It's critiquing.
Mhm.
Hey, try this, try that. Uh,
You gave me some very helpful stuff, when I first got in the ring, because I had the same issue you mentioned where, I'm tall, so I would hunch over. Sometimes when you're nervous, you skip steps. So, when you stop a boxer, you say stop. You're supposed to give them a command. But when you're first in the game and you're kind of shy, you just say stop, but then you just let them start boxing again because you're skipping steps because you feel like in your head nobody will notice, this isn't that big of a deal. But sometimes the little things are the big things, and that's what separates the great officials from the good officials.
yeah, yeah, and it's doing the homework. It's doing homework. I'm home on a beautiful Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and I'll put on some world boxing,
Mhm.
and I'll sit there and I'll watch, or I'll score bouts, or I'm watching, pro shows, from a week or two ago or a couple of years back. I'll put it on and I'll watch,
Mhm.
and I'm looking over everything, and hell, just recently, check this out. Just recently, us as referees, we train and we practice and we go over, we give ourselves mental reps, for scenarios that might never happen,
Mhm.
right?
All right.
But
I know where you're going at
earlier
this.
in the week, you know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier in the week, or last week, we had a double knockdown on a pro show. And who was the referee?
Ty
Our
Parker.
guy from our guy from South Texas, Ty Parker. And he nailed it, dude.
Mhm.
That's something we may never see again. That us as referees may never happen to us in our careers, but it happened to him. He trained for it. We practiced for it. It's when we're in the garage, or in the hotel room when we're alone. It's just us and our thoughts in a hotel room. We're going over stuff like that. And he nailed it.
Mhm.
And it's doing those mental reps. It's getting in the rule book and doing trainings.
And before I leave the subject alone, I will say that I'm glad you mentioned Ty because people might wonder if they're a boxing official, if the studying and doing the homework, if it really pays off. And in terms of being somebody that does their homework, does their film study, by the book, great at what they do, Ty Parker is one of those people for me. And I think he's just a great example of somebody that's really kind of moving up fast in the boxing world. And I think he's a perfect example of somebody that does their homework, does a great job, and is kind of being rewarded with that with some of the work he's getting lately.
Yeah, yeah, dude. And I usually I'll email officials.
Hmm.
I'll send an email out to like 20, 30 officials. Hey, score this bout. Let me know what y'all think. Or what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And because I want to be critiqued,
Hmm.
and he was one of the ones that would respond, you know. You know, gotten plenty of texts from other officials. Hey, what do you think about this bout? Or I judge this. What do you think? Watch this bout, and that's what I'm talking about, putting in the work, and it shows who does the homework, who puts in those mental reps, or who does the traveling,
Hmm.
it
I,
shows.
I think that's absolutely right. We'll start to wrap that up with this. You did mention the Golden Gloves. Golden Glove season is coming up. I think we've got San Antonio, we've got Austin, we've got the Valley. Do we have Corpus this year?
Yes, Corpus. We have
S-
Corpus. I can't remember the dates.
So
Might
tell us what you
be
know about the upcoming Golden Glove season. Tell us what you know.
okay. Golden Gloves, Austin, end of January in Round Rock. Um, Let me see. I'm going to try to bring it up real quick. Uh, we're going to do Austin Golden Gloves end of January.
Hmm.
The San Antonio Golden Gloves is Valentine's Day weekend, the 13th and 14th, 15th, maybe 12, 13, and 14. Yeah, 13th through the 15th. The Corpus Golden Gloves, February 20th through the 22nd. They're in Corpus. And the RGV Golden Gloves, Port Isabel, I believe. The March 6th and 7th, 7th and 8th, something like that.
Well, we love Port Isabel this time of year. Looking
Yes,
forward to the
sir.
RGV Golden Gloves. Let me
Especially in
close,
March.
especially in March. Let me close with this one. I know when you became president, one of your big overriding goals is to hopefully bring a national tournament, maybe to our region, whether that's in San Antonio, Central Texas, or in the Valley. Tell us, is that still one of your goals? Is that something you think could happen, bringing a national tournament to our region?
It definitely is. It definitely is. One thing I found is it's harder than it sounds. You
Hmm.
know, I expected it. Oh, no, no.
No.
It's so much preparation. Um, I have spoke to reps from the Valley
Hmm.
about something there, and we're working on something for there. I guess trying to see what we could put together. Um, during our JOs, let's say we had a rep from Colorado there.
Hmm.
I'm hoping it made a good impression on him to maybe do something in the future. I know Corpus has approached Colorado about a national tournament,
Hmm.
and
And let me jump in. We say
yeah,
Colorado, we're using that as a euphemism for officials for
the
USA
national
Boxing. Yes.
the national office. Yes, I'm sorry, the national office in Colorado. Um, but just those two for sure. Um, but yeah, trying to nail something down is turning out to be harder than. But it's still a goal. I haven't forgotten. You know, it's
And it's
it's
interesting.
actually just nailing someone down and trying to get something worked out.
Well, we compete with, cities that, in some cases maybe have subsidized convention centers. So it's easier to go to those kind of places, a place maybe like Lubbock or Wichita, where the city is perhaps paying USA Boxing as opposed to USA Boxing paying the city because, a destination city like San Antonio, it's always going to be harder to get those kind of events because there's kind of a line you got to wait in. I don't know if that's what you found, but that would be my interpretation of the situation.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been told. That's what I've been told. But to see um, Las Vegas in the
Hmm.
mix now,
Yeah.
you know, um, there's another major city in the South uh, doing a strong bid as well. For a
Mhm.
national tournament. A major what's the word? Not touristy, but what is it? Destination, right?
A certain place where you might drink a hurricane or a hand grenade.
Yeah.
Is that the city
A certain larger city in the South that's putting in a bid, for a national tournament. You know, um,
swampy kind of city in southeastern Louisiana, perhaps?
I'm not confirming nor denying,
Well,
but it is something I'd like. And like I
mhm,
said, when I talk to the reps from the Valley,
mhm.
we circle back a lot. Hey, what about this? What about that? And they're interested. And like I said, I know Corpus has been in discussions, direct discussions with the national office. If anything comes out of it, I don't know, but it's it's something I'd like. Yes.
And it's we have a lot of you'd be surprised you wouldn't think of like boxing as a maybe a sport where the politicians and stuff show up, but we have been in Corpus, the mayor, the city council, the city manager were there. We've been in Harlingen, the mayor was there. Edinburgh, I believe the mayor presented y'all some awards and some scholarship money. Of course, we've had councilmen, councilwomen in San Antonio fighting our events. So, I think it's interesting that we do have some civic support for boxing in our community, and it's just maybe finding those opportunities to see who our potential partners could be.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, like you said, the councilwomen, councilmen, they're all for it.
Hmm.
Oh man, that sounds great.
Hmm.
But it's actual where the rubber meets the
The
road.
rubber meets the road. Oh yeah.
It's that's tougher because now it's not a conversation between me and them.
Hmm.
Now we're going through the what is it, the visitors bureau or the convention bureau or whatever, and it's a lot more. I've realized quickly it's a lot more than just me sitting talking to someone. Hey, let's do this. Okay, cool. You
Well,
know,
we're all very excited for the future of boxing, whether that means a national tournament in our region or it just means plenty of great regional tournaments, plenty of great Golden Gloves tournaments, plenty of great what we call third party events. I mean, I think we're all excited about that too, and I think we're very excited about boxing in 2026 in South Texas.
yeah, yeah, and you know what? The now now there's tier one, two, and three ranking systems in
Mhm.
USA boxing, and there's maybe I'm going to say like eight or nine tier one. Tier one is like the I don't want to say entry level, but it's rankings points for our
Mhm.
boxers, right? And I was thinking, well, shoot, maybe at least we could do something like that, you know? If not a national as a tier three, maybe a tier one, you know? That might be something interesting,
And that's your
you
kind of
know?
event where boxers from the region show up. So maybe if you have something in Texas, it's boxers from New Mexico, Arizona, kind of like a Southwest regional kind of thing. Is that how?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's still a national tournament,
Mhm.
but it's not a week long deal. You know, it's open to everybody, but it's condensed into 3 days. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? It's if I'd like to do something like that, you know, I think that would be cool for our boxers. It gives boxers an opportunity to earn some rankings points, you know,
Absolutely.
instead of having to travel to other areas for those rankings points. They could bring them something here.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. And
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect place to close this out. I know when you sat down for this conversation, you weren't expecting to be sitting here for the length of a movie. So I appreciate all your time today. And I think it's a
Oh, yeah, no
perfect.
problem, dude. I love talking boxing, dude.
Well, absolutely. Well, that was you've been listening to Punches and Bunches. Our guest today, South Texas Amateur Boxing Association President Eddie Garcia. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.